The latest news, national issues, the political scene, and conversations with prominent personalities. All these firsthand at the forefront. Good morning. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. An impeachment complaint versus Vice President Sara Duterte was filed at the House of Representatives on Monday, coming from one party list congressman and 16 private complainants. Considering the recent verbal tug-of-war between the Vice President and several members of Congress, the House seems likely to impeach the Vice President, despite a request from President Bongbong Marcos not to pursue such action. With a forthcoming impeachment trial in the Senate, let's take a look at the last impeachment proceedings in the country. In 2012, majority of the Senate voted to convict Supreme Court Chief Justice Renato Corona after he was found guilty of Article 2 of the impeachment charges. Are Filipinos ready for another dose of impeachment trial? Joining us live at the BNC studio are three of the legal personalities who were part of the Corona impeachment trial. First, part of the prosecution, the private prosecution, is Attorney Demetrio Custodio.
Good morning.
Good morning, Attorney Demi. And serving as spokesperson and also part of the defense team was Attorney Rico Quicho. Good morning, Attorney Rico.
Good morning, Attorney Karen. Nice to see you again.
And also part of the prosecution team and also spokesperson for the prosecution, Congressman Miro Quimbo.
Good morning.
Good morning, Congressman Miro. Okay, so first let's start with juggling your memory about the impeachment trial. So we'll have a short quiz. I like doing this. So as a professor in law school, I often give surprise quizzes to my students, but now we'll be giving you questions about the impeachment, and then you'll have to write them in the papers. You'll have 30 seconds to answer.
No copying.
Okay. No copying. Okay, first question. How many articles of impeachment were filed against Chief Justice Corona?
Haba naman yan.
Oh, kasi Rico, may discussion. Okay, sige. You can show your answers.
Sure.
Show your
I'm
answers.
not very sure about it, but
Okay, so
I said
si
not
Attorney
sure.
Demi, 4 or 5, not
Not
sure.
sure.
5.
5. But I think they
Then-
withdrew some articles of impeachment during the proceedings, so we'll see.
Okay. And
7.
7, you're very sure with
I'm
7.
very sure, but we only heard 3.
Okay. Yeah, I remember some of the articles were dropped.
Yeah, we dropped it because they were senseless.
Now
Yeah,
you
and
can
the
say
correct
it,
answer
Miro.
is
Absolutely.
7.
Now you can say
Correct.
it.
Naalala
I
niya pa.
can reveal everything.
Oo nga, in hindsight, no? But I remember thinking that time when it was May and we were still on the approaching May, third article pa. I was like, oh my God, this is gonna take, 2 years or more?
Those were very stressful days and nights.
Yes, I agree.
If you remember, Attorney Karen, that was an everyday trial for
Every
4
day.
days of the week.
I agree.
Continuous trial.
And people were always waiting for 2 p.m.
Oo,
because
for
that's
the,
when the trial started.
yeah.
And I think before the Korean novelas, yun ang pinapanood talaga, yung impeachment trial at that time. No? Kasi kahit saan ka pumunta, kilalang-kilala si Miro noon.
Naku, kilala sa palengke.
I had friends abroad who would also watch the impeachment trial,
And we
despite
s-
the time difference.
And we still had free TV, so I think that really helped.
Yeah. Okay, next question. Which article of impeachment was Chief Justice Corona found guilty of?
Haba ng sagot,
Okay,
di ba?
sige. Answers up. You can show your answers on screen. Article 2
Article 2.
for Attorney Demi.
I think it's betrayal of public trust. I'm not very sure, but
Okay.
that's how I
And
remember it.
Article
Kong Miro,
2.
Sal, and
Sal,
Article 2. Okay, yes, the correct answer is Article 2.
Article
Hoy,
2.
dalawa na ako.
Oo
I have
nga,
1
nako,
point.
may makaka-perfect yata. Okay. Akbayan initiated the impeachment complaint against VP Sara this year and also against Chief Justice Corona. So that's something they have in common. But who from Akbayan was the main proponent of the impeachment against Chief Justice Corona back in 2012?
That's good, huh?
Okay, since tapos na, let's see. Si Attorney Demi pala is still writing.
You know, I can't remember,
Okay.
so...
Well,
So
that's
si
a question.
Attorney Rico Quicho, question mark. And si Attorney
That's a question
Demi,
mark. I'm drawing a
also
blank.
Si
Tama.
Kong Miro Waldenbello. Okay. Actually, the correct answer
Hindi ko
is
matandaan, ha?
Risa Ontiveros. So current Senator Risa
Ah,
Ontiveros.
she's
Yeah.
married, okay.
So interesting, no?
As a
Trivia.
she was a congresswoman back then, or as a
She
private
was
citizen?
in Congress, I suppose, as part of Akbayan.
No, she wasn't
She was
part
not?
of Congress then. Not anymore, to my recollection. But anyway, yeah.
But as part of Akbayan pa rin.
It was part of Akbayan. They were both two reps. It was Waldenbello and Risa.
Okay, so you're probably correct, no? But this was what our researcher said also. It was Risa, but maybe it's dalawa sila.
But we're the guests, so tama kayo.
Sige, but we'll give you partial points.
Pwede.
Okay. And next question. Among the congressmen, name 3 who voted against the impeachment of CJ Corona, of Chief Justice Corona. Yeah. So these are some congressmen who voted against the impeachment of Chief Justice Corona. Okay. Show your answers.
3, di ba? You
Oo,
said 3.
3. Oo.
Pero sa akin, isa lang talaga yung
Isa
very
lang na
prominent
maalala
doon,
ninyo.
oo.
Okay, so si Attorney Demi, si Congressman Toby
Toby
Tiangco,
only. This is
and
okay.
Rico Quicho also remembers
Of course,
Toby Tiangco. Si Kong Miro,
It was, I remember Toby, Edsel Lagman, and Danny Suarez.
okay. Nako, those are correct. Ang galing, ha?
Sorry guys, I was on the floor every day, so I have an advantage.
Kasi at that
nga.
time, Miro's
Si Miro's-
very talagang prominently helping the prosecution. So, ngayon pa lang natin nalalaman ngayon from the insider.
Oo nga eh. Ako
Insider
kasi
ako eh.
by the time I was
Marami
called.
bibisto.
Oo nga, dapat pala.
Attorney
Hot seat
Karen, this
natin
is
si
very
Kong
embarrassing.
Miro.
I didn't know this was a memory.
No, it's okay. Even for me, I was thinking, I don't remember as well.
Meron,
Okay.
meron. Si Toby was the most prominent. But Edsel Lagman was the minority leader. And then Danny Suarez was the incoming minority leader.
Who also voted.
They had a term sharing agreement.
Okay.
It was
may
really a
term sharing
tussle
na pala
between
before.
Pinoy and GMA. More than
At that
anything
time.
else. It was a proxy war. So,
Interesting. Okay, dapat may mga, mamaya, Kong Miro, you have to, kahit hindi ko tanungin, ikaw na yung mag-volunteer na
hindi
sa'yo.
na, hindi na. Basta kinalimutan ko
Mas
din.
marami ka
Oo.
pang alam. Okay.
Namimiss na yata ni
Last-
Miro yung house eh.
Oo
Kaya
nga.
mukhang
Hindi ko na-miss yan.
Okay, last question. And this is at least more personal. Okay, so no right or wrong answers. Who among the senator judges gave you the most difficult time during the impeachment trial? Okay. Show your answers on TV. Okay. So it started at Attorney Demi.
Can I explain a bit, Attorney
Yes.
Karen? I would have said Senator Miriam also, but during my examinations of witnesses, she did not give me a hard time. So in response to the question, there was really nobody who
Okay.
gave me personally a difficult time.
Okay. Well, siguro at least hindi ka nahirapan, Attorney
Hindi niya
Demi.
ako pinusyonal
Hindi ka
yata.
sinigawan. Okay. Attorney Rico,
For me,
Senator.
I have not got the opportunity to be in the trial with Senator Miriam, but you know, just day in, day out, you could feel the intensity from Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago. And talagang makita mo yung yung depth ng knowledge niya, no? So for me, that's very intimidating. So hanggang ngayon naalala ko siya.
Or I guess as a lawyer, it's like being in court and kinakabahan ka about the
Yes.
judge na mapapagalitan ka
Exactly.
or mapupuna ka. Okay, let's see with Kong Miro.
Same.
Same. So we have a consensus here. It was Senator Miriam Defensor
Yeah.
Santiago. Nakakamiss din siya, no? Like having
Oh,
someone
yeah,
like
of
her in
course.
Senate.
The Senate is not what it is without her.
Yeah.
And Senator Joker Arroyo, I suppose, no?
Yeah.
Anong naalala nyo about Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago? About dun sa trial, yung talagang memorable for you?
Sa akin, yung pinapagalitan niya si Vit Aguirre, no?
Yung tapos nagtakip ng
Oo,
tenga si
nagtakip ng tenga.
Attorney
For me,
Vit.
that was very intense, no?
Alala ko rin. I was live on the floor at that time
Yeah,
sa
we were there,
plenary.
no? Yeah,
Yes.
we were there.
What about you, Kong Miro?
Yeah, I think the daily grind that Junjun Tupas had to go through. Every day was a gauntlet. I can imagine the stress and the anxiety she was causing kay Junjun, which honestly, in my mind, was a bit bordering on the unfair because as the chief prosecutor, you cannot be expected to answer anything under the sun, constitutional law, political law, remedial law. Mahirap. So, yun ang talaga naalala ko yung daily niya, hindi pinapagalitan, sinasabon talaga eh. Ha?
Ako naalala ko, sinisigawan siya. Lalo na dun sa list of properties, talagang may time na yung stress na feel ko sa buong plenary. But again, it was really good to have a legal brain like Senator Defensor Santiago.
Tsaka it was the plethora of all the Latin terms, right? So, talagang
Nagsawa tayo doon, no?
it's a legal method lecture.
Yeah. And now let's go to the details of the trial. So the trial started in January 2012 and a decision was reached by May 2012. In your opinion, do you think that pace was fast or slow?
Oh,
As a private prosecutor, I found it to be just right insofar as the pacing is concerned. We were able to present the number of witnesses that the prosecution team had deemed to be necessary to establish the basis for the articles of impeachment. And the frequency of 4 days a week trial also added to the speeding up of the. But all in all, it really was a very, very long trial. I think it was a matter of more than 39 daily hearings that had taken place. So it was not fast, it was not slow, it was just right for the Senate to have come to its conclusion.
And do you think that if there were to be another impeachment trial based on the circumstances now, and have you seen the articles of impeachment filed against Vice President Sara?
Yes, I saw the other day articles, and there are many. There are very many articles, and in one article only, I expect there's going to be a lot of witnesses going to be based their testimonies on documentary evidence. And that's why I think for this trial, it might take a bit longer.
Okay. And when, yes, Kong Miro, you have...
Well, that's really going to be a problem. I think that we need to put into context that the trial then happened a year and a half before the elections. So the complaint was filed December 12. I remember it quite vividly because it's my birthday. And,
December?
December 12. So,
We're both December celebrants.
nako, baka marami pa tayong compatible dyan. Ha? But, yeah, it can't have that pace because today elections are forthcoming. Congress will have a break December. It will have a longer break come Feb because election times are coming. So, ang liit ng window lang talaga. And I don't think they can risk spreading it after the elections because first, I think there's going to be a legal question. Whether can you extend beyond the current 18th Congress? Can you do that when the articles were filed during this Congress?
Yeah, actually,
So
that would be an
that's going
interesting...
that's going to be a legal
Yeah,
issue.
that's an interesting issue that you raised, Kong Miro, and we have 4 lawyers here right now. Because the composition of Congress will change by then. So how
Yes.
can you have
Yes.
like the same people, well, again, and even Senate will change its composition. So the impeachment court will technically change the judges.
And if you hear it of course, it happens, I mean, in the court of law that, judges are changed and, midstream. But I think as a political exercise, I think it's going to be very difficult. And, yeah, I think on the part of the prosecution, they'd rather to end it early rather than ending it late. That's my take.
And when Chief Justice Corona was impeached, several members of the House at that time formed the core part of his prosecution team. And I remember when every time I sat as spokesperson also for the defense team, always across me was Kong Miro, at that time Congressman Sonny Angara, and then Congressman Erin Tañada. So really, for me, the image of the prosecution was members of Congress.
It's very political.
Very political.
Very
talaga.
political.
So, how important is it to have a private prosecution team? I think Attorney Demi and Kong
Yeah,
Miro can answer this. And then-
Ako will answer that. Kasi that was a fight, that was a tussle. We need private prosecutors because members of Congress, very few can prosecute. Very, very few practitioners. In fact, today, we had, in terms of percentage, we even have less number of lawyers now in Congress. And very few practitioners. They don't know the rules of evidence. They don't know the concepts of the evidence required. So you really need a private prosecutor to be able to substantially pursue an impeachment complaint.
And if I may add, Attorney Karen, while this is a political exercise, the fact is that it is still judicial in character. And therefore, if you will recall in the Corona impeachment trial, the three of us who were lead private prosecutors were all practicing lawyers. We need to be, because we need to keep abreast of how to present our evidence. And we also need to be private practitioners because we also need to advise, I'm sorry to say this, the congressmen on the evidence that needs to be presented, et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Yeah, exactly.
And therefore, jiving with Kong Miro was saying, it really is indispensable if you're going to present your evidence correctly and properly and make them admissible, that the presenters would be private legal practitioners.
And Attorney Demi, you saw the composition of the defense team that time, where the lead defense was former Justice Serafin Cuevas. What was your assessment at that time? Did you feel na mahihirapan yung prosecution against the legal team of the defense?
I remember, I'd like to recount an anecdote that during the trial, when Justice Cuevas, bless his soul, was going to stand. He's my professor in UP, and I know he's a very competent person. And by him standing in the as lead of the defense panel, I knew that they had a very formidable team.
And we also had deans of law schools.
Dean Dindo de Los
Los
Angeles,
Dean Dindo.
Jack Jimenez.
Yes, Professor Jack Jimenez.
People also
and-
like Attorney Quicho. And,
Yeah.
and I think the reason for that, we had great difficulty looking for lawyers. We had great difficulty. Even the lead prosecutor, he only agreed to it because he was my former boss.
I'm
So,
surprised.
that was
You had
ayaw.
difficulty feeling namin
No,
nila, Rico.
no.
Dehado kami. Parang
No,
we
no.
were so few and there were so many lawyers in the prosecution, combined, private and also Congress. And we felt like people wanted to be part of the prosecution.
No, I think, don't ever forget, ang kalaban namin was the Chief Justice. So whatever it is that you do, the trial lasts for 6 months. But if you are part of the prosecution, you are effectively castigating the judiciary, which is your bread and butter.
And I think-
So many lawyers were very, very hesitant because they felt like it would have a lifelong impact on their legal careers.
Yes,
So-
I think, Miro, the pressure is really on the prosecution.
Yeah.
Because you cannot just drop the ball, so to speak. And as far as the defense is concerned, it's not easy, but, we have a way of trying to discredit and destroy the pieces of evidence that would be presented. So I think the number of lawyers by the prosecution together with the staff would just be commensurate with the number of articles of impeachment that was initially submitted by the House to the Senate Impeachment Court.
And something to add to that, Attorney Karen. We all know that the burden is on the prosecution.
Yes,
And
by,
therefore
by law, that's how it's
by law.
designed.
And,
yeah.
and in order to convince, because if you remember, I think at that time, Mr. Enrile required that the quantum of proof be clear and convincing evidence. And therefore, it had to be something that would be preponderant insofar as the evidence. And therefore, it would be easier for the defense to just parry off the thrust of the prosecution evidence. And that is why I think that the prosecution team at that time had more lawyers because they had to have more evidence, more research, etc., etc. That required more heads of lawyers to...
That was a major setback. The first day of the trial was a major setback for the prosecution. People did not notice it if you're not well versed with the law. When the minute that effectively Senate President Enrile practically imposed the strict adherence to the rules of court, and more important, significantly, was the quantum of evidence that was required was now practically a criminal prosecution.
And we
Kulang na lang beyond reasonable doubt. And obviously, we were really going to have difficulty because we had a terrible complaint to begin with.
Yeah.
So you admit that?
Oh, it was a terrible
Because as a
complaint.
lawyer, I remember reading the complaint and I said, who prepared this? This is not
Yeah,
the...
because it was prepared by somebody which up to today I don't even know. And
you don't know who drafted the impeachment complaint?
No.
Interesting.
No.
Okay. And one of the, I think the first article of impeachment was the midnight appointment. Do you remember? I'm also not very clear as to what the first article of impeachment was, but that was, I remember, an issue being thrown against Chief Justice Corona. But the Supreme Court did, before the impeachment, come out with a decision saying that it was not a midnight appointment. So in hindsight, do any of you still agree that that should have been part of the articles of impeachment?
you know,
I think in hindsight, there should not have been an impeachment against the Chief Justice. I still believe in that.
Yeah.
But, that's how it works. That's the system. The provision in the Constitution is very clear insofar as the impeachment is concerned. But, the real value of filing an impeachment complaint is very messy. And I think it's always counterproductive because it disrupts very important government functions, especially legislative functions.
Well, as part of the prosecution, Attorney Demi, Kong Miro, did any of you suggest to just drop that article of impeachment from the start? At least when it comes to the midnight appointment.
I wanna answer me up to today. I still strongly believe that it was a necessary procedure. I knew it was going to be painful. In fact, at the onset, I was trying to reach out to some of my friends who were close to the Chief Justice and said that this is going to be very difficult for him and for his family. But it's part of accountability, and I strongly believed in many of the things that we were fighting for. And really, it's a matter of perspective. And I think I respected the lawyers when they felt like that the attack on the judiciary, while a co-equal branch, was the weakest among the three. But we had a different perspective. Our perspective was, it was the strongest because it had a mandate that could not be questioned except through impeachment. They stay there forever until they're 70. If they may come up with a decision that is unjust, wrong, without legal basis, it becomes law because it's the Supreme Court. So I honestly felt like members of the Supreme Court are really held on to a much higher standard. Because sometimes they'd compare, bakit yung mga congressman, ganito, puro mga magnanaka, puro mga dorobo. But I'd always say that that may be partly true in terms of perception, but members of Congress go to the people to get a mandate every 3 years. The mandate of the Supreme Court is just entirely borrowed first from the president who appoints them, and then secondly, the Constitution as approved by the people. There is no direct mandate. So that's why the standard is really much higher. I don't at all regret what happened. Maybe what I regretted was the things that happened after the prosecution. I think that once he was removed from office, that should have been the end of the story. But I think he was prosecuted for other things, which I found to be unjust already.
Okay,
Eventually, he was duly vindicated by
Yes,
the
we'll
Supreme
talk
Court.
about that
Yes.
So if you
later
look back,
because
you know-
we'll look at the cases that were filed and what happened to them. But speaking of prosecution, even before an impeachment complaint was filed against Vice President Sara Duterte, she was claiming that she is being politically persecuted. Do you see this as following the same pattern as what transpired during the time of Chief Justice Corona's impeachment? But before you answer that question, we'll have to take a short break. At the forefront, we'll return.
In the world of business, expansion is inevitable.
So I was a serial dater.
Not just a serial entrepreneur.
Yes.
You need fresh perspectives.
Different perspectives, different capabilities.
The sense of fulfillment, the sense of accomplishment. It's like you gave birth.
The relationships we have, how we treat our people. For me, that is the essence.
I'm Ces Orenia Drilon at ito ang Usapang Bilyonaryo.
At BNC, 12 noon doesn't mean break.
Good
But
afternoon, I'm Mai Rodriguez. Today on Newsfeed at noon, staunch Duterte ally Salvador Panelo believes Vice President Sara Duterte will be impeached. United Nations hailing the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah. Australia officially banning children under 16 from social media. And those are the news this hour. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Welcome back at the forefront. And gentlemen, I was asking earlier, even before an impeachment complaint was filed against Vice President Sara Duterte, she was claiming that she is being politically persecuted. Do you see this as following the same pattern as what transpired when Chief Justice Renato Corona was impeached?
Well, let me put it this way. An impeachment proceeding is always political. But I would rather stay on my lane and, not give any unsolicited advice at this point.
Got a very safe answer. Answering it like a lawyer, Attorney Demi.
I am not sure what the question requires of me, but I understand that the impeachment complaint has already been filed and it has to go through the process. And despite the advice of the chief executive not to pursue it, given to his allies in Congress, it still is a duty on the part of the House to see to it that it complies with the requirement of substance and form. And if they do come to such a conclusion, it has to go through the process. So I'm not sure whether there's a pattern that's identical to that of Chief Justice Corona. But if there is or there is not, I don't think it's consequential at this point.
Kong Miro?
Well, my wife is a member of Congress, so I wouldn't want to comment on the merits because they're going to decide on that. But, it happens for every impeachment complaint. Just like what Attorney Quicho said, it's a political exercise, but it's a necessary exercise. And it's a constitutionally enshrined exercise. And people will always come up on both sides. One will say it's political, the other side will say it's not. So it's par for the course, to be honest.
Well, it is often repeated that an impeachment trial is a political exercise. So despite the fact that you have the rules of court somewhat applicable to it, it is a numbers game in Senate, sitting as an impeachment court. Is that something that the defense took into account? Do you remember, Attorney Rico, before coming into the trial, did the defense start counting whether they had enough votes in Senate?
Well, I think at that time, if I could still vividly remember that we are so engrossed coming up with very strong and credible defenses. But I think some of our members back then are already contemplating on the numbers because it's a numbers game. So I think even the pace of the trial is also dictated by the numbers at that particular point in time. So I just really hope that in any impeachment proceedings, we always hear that it is public interest that is involved. I really hope that it is public interest and not just some selfish interest or some selfish political interest. Because at the end of the day, we owe the people the opportunity to rise above all this noise, all these distractions.
And Kong Miro, you probably have more insights on this because at least Congress would be more politically attuned to what was going on. did the prosecution have the numbers in Senate when the impeachment trial started?
No.
At the start, wala. Kasi clearly we know what happened in the end, that they
No.
did get the numbers. Pero nung start, wala.
No, we did not have the numbers at that time. And we knew very well the challenge that was required to be able to, we needed 2/3 or at least 16 members of Congress, of the Senate. And that's very, very difficult. But like I said, the way you dictate, you want to win. I mean, obviously you want to win. It's an exercise regardless of where your motivation comes from. And I agree with Attorney Quicho, it should be patriotic. And if you want to win, you only stop presenting your evidence if you know you have the numbers. That's going to be when you rest. So obviously it took time, and then eventually that's the objective. You go from one person to the other. I'm sure Congress today is already, or at least the complainants are probably thinking who among the senators will side with them. But even as of today, it's a mystery whether does Congress want to file it or not, because it seems that the president's already told Congress not to file it, and Congress will rarely disobey the president.
Kung Miro, imagine one of those who dismissed the complaint during the impeachment proceedings of Chief Justice Corona is now the president.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
So,
Back then, Senator Bongbong Marcos. But at
He's
what
only
point
one of
did
three,
you...
actually.
One of
Yes,
three,
one
yeah.
of three. You had Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago and Senator
Joker.
Arroyo.
Oh.
And Kong Miro, at what point did you
The smartest
know
in the Senate, actually.
kailangan natin
The
sabihin
three of
yan.
them.
At what point did you know that you had the numbers? Would you also know Attorney Demi?
That was a complete mystery to the prosecution until the day it came.
Baka naman as private prosecutor, but for the congressman, did you know at some point that you had the numbers in Senate?
It's all dictated by, a great part is really evidence and public opinion. It's really a combination of both. Meaning, if they feel like the evidence is, we just harp really on Salen, and that there was a declaration, and we uncovered items that were not declared. It was just straight off that, and I think 50% was really the public pressure, considering that the public at that point in time was already tilted towards the impeachment. So those are the two things that you really need to work on at the same time. You cannot just present evidence, you need to take care also of the public perception.
Okay,
court of
speaking
public
of...
opinion.
Yes.
Yes, and it was televised. But speaking of evidence, the core of the prosecution's evidence came from bank accounts. And we all know about the bank secrecy law. At that point, it was very strict. How was the prosecution able to circumvent that? How was the prosecution able to get details of the bank accounts?
Circumvent. Huh?
Exactly. Objection, Your Honor.
I was the one who presented the
Yes.
president of PS.
But how were you able to get details?
Let's not go to conclusions that...
Yeah. So not okay. So how
I
were you
can
able to go
recall-
around that? But seriously, that is a mystery to everyone, because I remember Congressman Banal, I think, was the one who said there was someone who left it at
The
his
small
gate,
lady.
at the gate
The small
of his
lady.
house.
Oh, that's different.
But obviously for us,
Valis and
you're thinking, how can
properties.
that be the evidence falling from the sky? And then it was, God bless his soul, Congressman
Ray Umali.
Ray
Ray
Umali,
Umali.
who
I
said
saw
a
them.
small
They
lady
have
gave
all
him
the bags with the documents.
Yeah, a small lady gave him also the documents while he was going to the parking lot or something. So to this day, it is a mystery how the prosecution was able to get details of the bank account. So can you help us understand?
Okay. I was the one, like I said, who presented the PS Bank president, and I was the one who brought out the accounts, the very numerous accounts that the Chief Justice had maintained. That was, I think, the main source of why he was convicted. But the source of these documents, Attorney Karen, was just given to me by the prosecution team. It was just my duty to present it, so I will stay away from the question of how we were able to get. But there was a question.
Poisonous tree. Huh?
But there was a question insofar as
No, but I think, Karen, if you have the complete government machinery working against you to impeach a sitting Chief Justice, I think it would be easier to build your case.
And to gather the evidence.
Documents,
Yes,
because I
I'm
could
sorry,
just
I'm going to
imagine
be blunt here
the
as
LRA,
well.
the Land Registration Authority, they released so many lists of properties under the name of the Corona family. That would be difficult if you do it in an ordinary trial.
But let me just add to that, Attorney Karen. We were not circumventing the laws. In fact, if you will recall, there was a legal issue insofar as the foreign accounts deposits of the Chief Justice was concerned.
That stayed.
Yes, we were prevented from looking into because of the FCDU law.
Yes.
And therefore, it cannot be said that the prosecution made shortcuts or tried to circumvent the requirements of law, because still the Senate required us to adhere to some form of compliance with the rules. And therefore, while we were able to present evidence on the peso accounts, we were not able to present evidence on the foreign accounts.
Yeah, but I do remember Justice Cuevas also objecting to the admissibility even of the peso accounts. But yes, Kong Miro.
I just want to be fair. I was intrinsically involved with every evidence that was coming to our way. And I need to be able to stress that in fairness to both Kong Ray as well as Kong Bolet, there was really a deluge also of many evidence being sent to us because there's so much public interest. And whether you like it or not, there would be pro-corona, anti-corona, and we would receive it. And some we even did not present anymore because there was just so much. It just so happened that these were two particular evidence that were given, and I can only take the word of my fellow members of Congress at that point in time, because when I asked them, how did you come to possess this? That was a story that they gave. So we simply had to accept it and let the private prosecution and let the senator judges decide on the admissibility.
And
I think that's the important thing. The important thing, really, Attorney Karen, is that the senator judges, through the presiding, through Senate President Enrile, was able to make sure that only admissible evidence are part of the records of the impeachment case. So, very important that the senator judges are well versed with the rules of court.
And speaking of, you mentioned properties earlier, Attorney Rico. There were, at some point during the trial, 21 properties, but only 21 of the alleged properties of Chief Justice Corona were really declared his, out of 45 that was alleged by the prosecution. And I remember this even came out in the front page. But do you consider the allegation of 45 properties that were not proven to be owned by Chief Justice Corona as a blown up figure that was purposely done during the trial? But before you answer that question, we'll have to take a short break. At the Forefront, we'll be right back.
Ciao, mabuhay. You are watching The Word Exposed.
Prepare our hearts as we dive deeper into our faith and receive the strength from God's Word. Join Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle as he shares the reflection we need for the rest of the week.
We pray that the Word of God would find fulfillment in your life and His blessings be always upon you.
Every Sunday, 7 a.m., with replays at 3 p.m. Beauty, health, adventure. This is for you. Join Marie Lozano where she uncovers the untold stories and unexpected surprises in the world of lifestyle.
We wanted to create a space where we could dive into these topics not just by talking to experts, but experiencing the topics firsthand. Let me tell you about the Lifestyle Lab.
On BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Welcome back at the Forefront. And during the impeachment trial of Chief Justice Corona, at some point, there was an allegation that he owned 45 properties. But in the end, only 21 of the 45 were declared as his. As lawyers, do you consider this as part of strategy to present blown up figure that was supposedly
Objection, Your Honor. Leading again.
Leading question.
Adjectives used by-
I think, Attorney Karen, it is really because the impeachment proceeding is a public trial, and you also have to deal with the court of public opinion. So you have to excite the sensibilities of the people as well. So you have to hype the number of properties, and then eventually proving whether or not these properties are really owned by the respondent is a different story altogether. So if you look back, I will not be surprised that that happened. Whether or not it is correct or not, I still believe that that is the reason why we have the impeachment court, because it is still the venue where only admissible evidence, only credible evidence can be used to be part of the proceedings. So there's a vetting process anyway.
Yeah.
I need to respond. I need to
of
respond
course.
to that. I agree. It's a public trial also, but we need to be able to stress that whatever information we were churning out, they were always based on data that we were being provided. So yes, just like any prosecution, even if you feel like based on your initial evaluation is we can only charge the following: attempted homicide, etc. You will file attempted murder. If there's a way to justify that, because precisely you want to get the broadest possible charge, and then as Attorney Quicho said, you just trust the process to prune out what is admissible and what is allowable, so that you can come up with a legal conclusion that is based on evidence. But there was really no intention on the part of the prosecution to maliciously malign. I think we were pursuing a case in the same way that the defense were pursuing also the defense of the Chief Justice, and there would be a tendency to exaggerate things, and that would happen. But to say that it was untruthful, I think that's something that we will take exception to. But like Attorney Quicho said, eventually it's really the impeachment court that prunes it out and ferrets out what is true and what is not.
Okay, and you mentioned, Attorney Rico, that this is a court of public opinion. And I think having that happen where public opinion becomes very involved is the fact that it was televised. Do you think that among all of you lawyers here, if there were another impeachment trial, would you advise that it should be or should not be televised again? And now we have other avenues. There's TikTok, and social media is heightened compared to the impeachment trial 12 years ago. So do you think it would bode well to have an impeachment trial that's televised and covered heavily, or is it better to keep it behind closed doors?
I think it should be open to the public, because we are talking about public accountability. So when we talk of public accountability, it is not only about the respondent that is in the scrutiny of the public opinion, but also the prosecutors, the public prosecutors, the congressman, who would be engaging the defense in the trial of the articles of impeachment. So I think it should be made public, because it's trust and confidence of the people.
And we must remember, Attorney Karen, that not only is the matter of the articles of impeachment being matters of public interest, you're going to have to give a very good reason to the public why they're going to be cut off from all of these proceedings. This is a matter that each and every Filipino needs to be familiar with or knowledgeable of. And therefore, I see no reason why they should be excluded from this. And televising it is going to lead to a more transparent. The Filipino will be able to come to a intelligent conclusion as to what's happening. They will see that there is no railroading. They will see that evidence is being presented in the right way that it is being presented. So it gives everybody a chance to make a judgment insofar as the validity of the impeachment proceedings is concerned.
I agree with both of them, but you are correct. The biggest challenge in a public trial today is the availability of the different social media. And there's just no accountability. Unlike before, if you had the TV stations or there's always somebody you could castigate, you could question, somebody would be accountable for these statements. But today, I am 100% sure TikTok will explode with snippets, with spliced videos, and the authors of which hindi mo kilala kung sino. So, it's going to be a battle of public opinion, particularly when you have both the president and the vice president on opposing camps. And the vice president has a strong set of supporters. Gagamitin lahat yung mga medium na yan. Now, how does the Senate ensure that it's able to take control of the narrative, or at the very least of the release of information? That's going to be the challenge.
Because it also happened in the U.S., the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial. It was all over TikTok, all over social media.
I think, Karen, the real challenge in an impeachment proceeding now is how to make sure that only verified and credible information are shared to the public. Because with the age of social media now, the influx of information is very rapid. So I think there should be fact checkers, there should be more, how do you call this? Not luminaries, but at least lawyers who are well-versed in the proceeding, who would be giving their credible, independent, and verifiable information on the subject matter. Otherwise, how could we now shift the grain from the shaft, so to speak?
And the last point to that, Attorney Karen, is that if you don't televise it on a live basis, there might be some misinformation if you splice it, cut it up, and present it in the way that it will influence public opinion. It might even gaslight some people. So that's the problem. And that can be solved if you go direct to the source, continuously, and live.
Most significantly, it will now allow certain channels to flourish. That's how Rappler flourished. That's how ANC flourished. Because they became a source of this kind of information that the people wanted to
Okay.
So we will be back
But
here at
I'll just go back to the statement before that this is a political exercise, because Kong Miro earlier touched on what he found to be unnecessary was the cases filed against Chief Justice Corona after he was impeached. And all those cases that were filed against him in relation to allegations of corruption and tax evasion, they were eventually dismissed. And the last case dismissed in the Sandigan Bayan was only in 2023. But then relate this to also the privileged speech of then Senator Jinggoy Estrada, saying that they were offered and paid 50 million pesos for senator judges to vote to convict Chief Justice Corona at that time. So I guess a question to everyone, for the prosecution, were you aware that this was going on, that there were negotiations being made to secure a conviction?
From the private prosecutor's part.
That's for a conclusion.
From the private prosecutors, we are completely not aware if there was such a thing. But to the point that subsequent to the impeachment, that cases have been dismissed, that just exemplifies the difference in the quantum of evidence that is required in a judicial exercise and in a non-judicial exercise, like an impeachment proceeding. So that explains why there are different results coming from each of these two different exercises.
Well, Kong Miro,
I want to answer that.
I overruled your objection, so you have to answer my question.
No, well, that's a statement of Senator Jinggoy. As to whether that's true or not, we can't really take it face value because...
But you were not aware that
No.
that President Aquino was interfering or trying to...
No. And to my recollection, he was not. But are there backroom discussions trying to convince everybody? Certainly. That will happen. And that's going to happen in every proceeding where you make a judgment. And please, even in the Supreme Court, even among judges, it happens too. Here, it's just more acceptable because it's a political exercise. But like I said, I think many of the senator judges decided on the basis of public opinion as well as based on the evidence as presented. I still hold on to that position. But like as you said, with the dismissal of the cases, I truly feel like today that it was an injustice on the part of the Chief Justice to be subjected to further prosecution after he was removed. I think removal is the biggest punishment you can impose on an individual, and that should have been it. So I think as far as the subsequent prosecution was concerned, I think it was entirely uncalled for. That's my opinion.
And Attorney Rico, sorry briefly because we're running out of time, but would that have resulted legally in a mistrial? Because Senator Bong Revilla also said later on that he was driven in a car where someone was talking to him to convict. And I'm trying to remember if it was at that time Secretary Maro has, is what he said.
Karen, that's already after the fact. They utter these statements after the impeachment proceeding has been concluded. But this is what I feel strongly about. Redemption is real. And Chief Justice Renato Corona has been redeemed and his name vindicated by all of the charges that have been dismissed against him. So, hindsight is 2020. We remain as friends and we look forward that any impeachment proceedings that may prosper should be better.
Yeah.
Always for the benefit of the Filipino people.
And if there were another impeachment against the vice, and this time against the vice president, would you be in the defense or prosecution?
I will just watch and enjoy my popcorn.
Attorney Demi.
I will reserve my opinion on this.
Miro, should I even ask?
She might be one of the private prosecutors.
No. I think I just hold on to the fact that, it's really a constitutionally enshrined process that needs to be protected and it needs to be respected. And at the end of the day, parties need to adhere to their mandate, which is really finding accountability of public officials. This is the only way you can hold a person accountable, no other way, because they are protected and shrouded with a veil of defense by the Constitution, and only the impeachment is a very sacred activity, and I hope people respect it and really pursue it based on what the framers of the Constitution wanted.
And this is
Thank
the
you.
only democratic way
Yes.
to ensure public accountability.
Yes.
But
and I
parties
hope,
are given a chance to present
Yeah.
their sides.
sayang, we're out of time, but it was really a pleasure to have all of you here. Attorney Demetrio Custodio, Congressman Miro Quimbo, and Attorney Rico Quicho.
Reunion, huh?
Oo, reunion.
Nice
But
to
as
see
everyone
everyone.
can see, after being on opposite sides, we're all friends.
Yes.
The country's last impeachment trial was a political exercise that appears to have granted the sitting administration's wish to ease out a Supreme Court Chief Justice. While there is no certainty yet about an impeachment trial against a sitting vice president, as they say, history repeats itself. But we have the power to change the course of history if we always look back and learn from the past. Be timely informed, be insightful of the news. Always stay at the forefront. Join us again tomorrow for meaningful conversations that would help you form an objective personal opinion. This is Attorney Karen Jimeno. Thank you for spending your hour with us.